Chapter 3. Winter had been on us for 2 months, and the forest creatures were fat and fluffy in their new coats. It had started to snow once, but the ground didn't hold it, which always disappointed me. I only remembered a few times when there was enough snow to make tracks in. One of those times, Pap and I made pine bark sleds and had races down the river bank. I always wanted to do it again. On the morning Pap broke his leg, the north wind was tossing the tops of the trees, and gray clouds raced over our heads. Pap was always alert when the wind stirred the forest floor and cartwheeled the leaves. It was hard to tell which sounds were natural and which weren't. We were checking traps along a beaver dam only a mile from the lodge. With the wind blowing like it was, and us being so close to Mr. Wellington's place, Pat must have been extra nervous. I think he was too busy looking around for signs of people to pay attention to where he was going. He slipped on the dam and got his shin caught between two branches. He had just enough time to turn and look at me before he fell into the beaver pond on his back. The water was so clear I saw his face staring at me and wincing in pain. I jumped down after him and jerked at the branches until his leg came loose. The rest of Pap splashed into the water, and then he dragged himself out of the pond. After he was propped against a cypress knee, I went and found some sticks to use for a splint, and we bound his leg with the leather shoelaces for my moccasins. That afternoon, I got Pat back to the shelter in the wheelbarrow. He pulled himself inside and saw how much his leg hurt by the sweat that soaked his face and clothes. I helped him up on the hide pile and stayed next to him to give him water as he needed it. Pap didn't like doctors, and he didn't like medicine that you can find in the forest, so there wasn't much else we could for me to do. Sometime that night, Pap told me to take his boot off. I watched his hands white knuckle the roots above his head while I pulled slowly on the heel. He didn't make any noise because it was nighttime. When I got the boot off, bloody water and sand poured out of it. I cut the sock away from my nut with my knife and placed it to the side. We saved everything. Even a bloody sock could make a rag to patch clothes. In the dim light of the grease lamp, I saw parts of Pap's bone coming through his skin. Seeing bone and blood and wounds was nothing to me. I dealt with them almost every day, killing, skinning, and butchering animals. I only hesitated so that Pap would tell me what to do. Get a rag and wipe it out. Wipe it off, he said. Boil some water and put the rag on the water before you do, so the wound won't get infected. That's right. I went to the wood stove and did as he said. When I returned and began to gently wipe his leg, I watched his face. I saw his expression change when the rag went over the jagged portion of bone. Does it hurt? Just keep wiping. You want me to go get Mr. Abrascato? Nothing he can do. You can't do yourself, boy. I nodded and kept wiping. I stayed up with him that night after the wound was cleaned. After a while, Pap didn't seem to be concerned that we stay quiet anymore. He lay there and talked to me and told me most of what he was thinking. Tell me again why we live out here, he asked me. Because we never asked for anything and nobody ever gave us anything. Because of that, we don't owe anything to anybody. Who is it that thinks we owe them something? The government. That's right. After a moment, and what's going to happen to everybody that relies on the government? When the war comes, they're not going to be able to take care of themselves, I said. They'll all have forgotten how to grow food and trap game, how to make their own clothes and shelter, he said. How to find their own medicine in the forest, I said. That's right. How to shoot rifles. That's right, Pap said. All of those things, and I know how to do it all. He nodded. I stood, walked over to the stove, and put some more wood into it. Even when Pap let us burn it all night, the heat was rarely enough to keep our breath from streaming in front of our faces. I returned to the hide pile. I'm not going to get better, he said. What? I'm not going to get better. You going to die? He nodded. I felt my stomach twist. Tonight? No, but soon. Something like this leg won't heal. How soon? I don't know, but I don't understand. Think about it. Think about a deer that breaks its leg. What happens? But you're not a deer, I yelled. There's no difference. We're all animals. Felt like I would get sick on the floor. What will I do? That's what I'm going to tell you. Pap said that it might not be long before Mr. Wellington ran me off the property. I would have to find someone else to live with. Pap said that there were many other people like us all over the country. He said there were more now than ever. Most of them were out west in Montana, Colorado, Utah, and Wyoming. Alaska was even better. A man could still homestead in Alaska. He could get to places where no one would find him. People could still make a living off trapping up there. Hides were worth something in Alaska. I'd have to find my way there. But how? You'll figure it out. You can't rely on me anymore. Just remember the things I taught you. Take cover during the day and move at night. Use the stars. Don't trust anybody. Write me smoke letters if you get lonely. Do you talk to Mama with smoke letters? Sometimes I do, he said. Does she say anything back? She does, but not in the way you think. How will I get answers from the smoke? Pap didn't say anything for a few seconds. You just do what I tell you, he finally said. For the first couple of days, I tried to keep our regular routine. Each morning while Pap was sick, I rose from before daylight and checked the traps. I brought back what I caught, skinned it, butchered it, and prepped the hide. I hauled water from the creek and cut needles for tea. In the late afternoon, I did my reading lessons, but it was hard to keep my mind on these things when Pap lying on the shelter getting worse. Suddenly, it seemed like there wasn't a reason for doing anything. Mr. Abrascato hadn't bought our hides in years. We had plenty of water stored up already, and if Pap was going to die soon, why did we need more? And how would I find a place like Alaska on my own? I couldn't clean Pap's wounds without him twisting around about in pain. Finally told me to stop worrying over it and leave it alone. It won't do it any good, he said. It's too far gone to trouble over it. It's not too much trouble, Pap. I don't mind. Leave it be. Put that rag away. What if we cut it off? Too late. Infection's up my whole leg. I started crying. I can't live by myself, Pap. He shook his head. Shut up, boy. You don't cry. You hear me? I wiped my eyes and nodded at the floor. I put my arms around his neck. I can't do it, Pap. I can't make it to Alaska. I can't fight the government. I like it here. I don't see why I can't get Mr. Abrascato to come help you. He'll just get the law down on you. I can run from the law. I can get away. Pap didn't answer me. He was quiet for a long time. You'll be all right, he finally said. I don't want to hear any more of it.